What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to TRJ Talks. I'm your host, Will Parkinson, at WillPod11 on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. All 32 Pod, Turn on the Jets podcast. Saturday afternoon here, kind of sitting here waiting for Darren Muji to get announced as the Jets' next GM. For right now, going to do something a little different. I'm going to talk just quickly about Aaron Glenn as we've kind of sat on this hire now for 3 or 4 days. Want to touch quickly on Darren Muji and what a potential regime could look like with him. And lastly, just do a quick Senior Bowl preview. Myself and Connor Rogers, obviously, the draft wizard that he is going to be down there. Connor's a superstar down there, no surprise. So it'd be good to be down there for I think my 4th Senior Bowl now, which has been pretty exciting, and my 4th combine coming up. So it's been awesome. Getting down there every year. My first Senior Bowl, the Jets actually coached in, and the Lions, and Aaron Glenn was on that Lions staff. It's where the original Aaron Glenn's dream job is the Jets, quote came from with Rich Cimini. So I want to just talk, on Aaron Glenn quickly. We've obviously had him, his presser will be Monday. I expect it to be very much Aaron Glenn, straight to the point. Maybe some jokes, but some, fiery words in a way. And I think fans will leave that, pretty pumped up about Aaron Glenn. I think it's even the people that maybe weren't as high on the Glenn hire. I think the more you sit on it, the more you're able to digest it and say, hey, this is a guy that was a top candidate, a top 3 candidate at worst in this cycle, maybe with Ben Johnson and Mike Vrabel. And I think he's a guy who, should be able to hire a really talented staff. We've already seen rumblings of Nick Caley and Steve Wilkes being his main coordinators, and Chris Banjo as a special teams guy with Westhoff and Todd Haley. Some names to watch. I mean, it's a damn good staff for a guy who took a job everyone said sucks. So, again, I look at this and I think to myself, okay, Glenn's a defensive guy, but Nick Caley's one of the most talented offensive minds that's not a coordinator in the league right now. McVay and Aaron Wilson had a report out yesterday that, they're still the favorites to get him. There's obviously the Bucs and the Texans job open right now, but Nick Caley coming in being your offensive coordinator while he's on an experienced play caller, bringing that McVay system over. Everyone, Robert Mace had a really good segment that he sounds exactly like Sean McVay, and I agree. That'd be really interesting. The Patriots wanted him bad last year to be Drake May's coordinator, and the Rams and Sean McVay, for a guy who's a tight ends coach, passing game coordinator, and helping with the QBs, like, he's getting paid a heck of a lot of money. So that would be an interesting hire. Again, Todd Haley maybe is that veteran name. We'll talk about it on any type of emergency pod with Darren Muji being hired. But I would say Haley is intense as fuck. He will rip you not one new asshole, but like 12 every practice. It'll feel like 90s football again at Jets camp. And I'm sure that's not necessarily what every player wants to hear, but it's what needs to happen over at One Jets Drive. So the guy that coached Aaron Glenn for 4 years here with the Jets in the 90s, 97 through 2000. He's been a head coach, et cetera. That's a name that I would definitely watch. On the offensive side, and defensively, we've heard the names of Steve Wilkes, obviously, who runs a similar front to Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich, although runs a lot more man coverage. Aaron Glenn, again, ran about 45%, cover 1 or cover 0 in 2024. The Jets ran about 30%. The defense, when he was good with the Jets, the 2 years prior, ran far more man, much more towards the middle to upper 30% range. Still not anywhere near as high, but I think you look at guys like Sauce Gardner, Michael Carter. Speaking with them, they're blatantly extremely excited about playing man coverage, more, and being able to get tested a little bit. They'll turn the football over more. They'll probably give up more big plays, but they'll also turn the football over and change games. It's not really necessarily about holding teams to 3. It's about taking the football away. So it will be a different style of defense. It will be differently, more aggressive, but not having to change scheme and system too much, I think will be important to keep kind of some consistency, especially across that defensive line and linebackers. Steve Wilkes, I mentioned, it'll be interesting to see what Glenn, brings over. Chris Banjo feels like the guy that'll be the special teams coordinator, former safety under Aaron Glenn, out in New Orleans, played in the league with Green Bay, I believe Chicago as well. Been with the Bears, for a couple of years as an assistant special teams coach. Mike Westhoff has got kind of volunteered to probably help out during camp, help with some of the hiring. Just having Westhoff around the building is a huge W. So Jets are looking to obviously wrap up GM here. By all intents and purposes, everything you hear and everything I've heard is Darren Muji's the heavy favorite. He's been a heavy favorite for almost 48 hours now. Not sure not entirely sure transparently what's kind of the holdup here or why we haven't had this been announced, but um, seems as though Lance Newmark's very much out. Not totally out, but very much not really anywhere near the top. And then Trey Brown from the Bengals. I think Muji's definitely the best candidate of the three, and I actually don't think it's particularly close. From a background perspective, from what you hear about them, from the front offices they come from an age perspective, from an alignment, and not being an echo chamber just because you're friends with the head coach doesn't mean you're going to be a good GM. I want my GM to be challenging my head coach. I want my head coach to challenge my general manager. I want them to have the same philosophy. And I want them to believe in analytics, to believe in height, weight, speed. I want them to believe in tape. I want them to believe in all these different things. Leadership, culture, guys, all like an aggressive mindset. All that stuff's great, but if they are just an echo chamber, yep, I love this guy, so do I, and just every time you're just, oh wow, we agree on everything. That's not always a good thing. Um, you want to be in those pre-draft meetings, standing on the table for your guy, and if Aaron Glenn's the face, be like, Aaron, look, I was on the road and I saw this guy and I love this guy, and like, nah, like I don't know, convince me, talk me into this guy, and like really have that type of mindset as opposed to just like being, you don't want yes men and henchmen all the time. I think it's important to have some strong lieutenants for if Muji is officially announced that you want, to have some strong lieutenants there, but do not want just yes men in the organization. The Jets have had that for far too long, and that needs to change. Again, I think from what you hear from an analytical perspective, used analytics out in Denver, talking to some people, much bigger analytical staff than the Bengals, who have one analytics guy and 5 total scouts in their organization. That scares me a lot. The AFL stuff from Trey Brown, why you went from a Super Bowl winning Eagles team and on track to be a GM, and then you just hear some, I don't know, you hear stuff and you're like, that doesn't, you got maybe kind of forced out a little bit and to take a different path, which is okay. And I hope he's able to get a GM job someday. I'm just not sure he's ready for this job the way I feel like Muji is. So again, I'm not saying that Muji's a superstar candidate. He's probably was in that tier 2 bucket going into this process. And even throughout the interviews they did, I thought there's other guys that are maybe more equipped, but we really don't know unless you've done the job. So I want to talk about the Senior Bowl a little bit. Again, I'm going to be down there next week. We haven't talked a lot of draft yet. We haven't talked a lot of offseason because they've been going through the head coach and GM search. Just want to, have some names for you guys to kind of pay attention to. I'll go through kind of where I think they may slot, maybe slot in. Just these are some names that, depending on where the Jets pick, maybe they're not a first-round guy for the Jets, but maybe in a trade back, or maybe they're not a second-round guy for the Jets, but they could be a name that you could see them talked into. A Shamar Stewart, for example, not a guy that the Jets are going to take in the top 7, but him or a Walter Nolan, if the Jets were to trade back in a defensive line perspective, like, sure, like that's, now we're talking about something, right? Maybe in Armand Embo, sorry, I apologize. I knew I was going to botch that. I literally practiced that like 9 times before. Embo, maybe you look at even a guy like a Jonas Sav, or, there's just names there that you think, oh, maybe if they trade back, maybe early second round, we'll see kind of how things work out. Corner Thomas out of Florida State, maybe it's Jaden Higgins in round 2. There's other names there. Demetrius Knight, obviously. Another one, Mason Taylor, maybe the end of day 2. From a tight end perspective, that's what you're looking at. Although obviously, I'm not sure everything in the Taylor family right now. I'm not sure he's you want to get into that, but then you look at some guys that are maybe more late day 2, early day 3 guys. A Jonas Sanker. You look at somebody like that. You look at a Darius Alexander. Daquan Felton, Jack Besh. At a TCU. Those are just some names. Jackson Hall is maybe a day 3 guy, but there's just names kind of across the board